Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. I'm Jackie in Washington, and I'm in Iowa. And so with the beauty of a recording platform that known as StreamYard, we are able to connect with guests from not only each other, but guests from around the world. And that's what's fun about telling the stories of the 1950s. We are so elated to have another wonderful guest with us today, whose story you find will be quite unique. And Jackie, where do we go from here?
Well, we go with some housekeeping. Viewers, please take a look at the bottom of your screen and you'll notice a purple banner, and it is indicating www.whilethewindmillwatched.com. Please go to this site if you are interested in getting material or information about our book, about the vendors, about the authors, and about the Fun Chat. We are now into the 70s with this Fun Chat. Yes. And if you have an interest, you may look at all of them from the past year and a few months. Also, look at the upper right-hand corner. You see that beautiful logo. It is of a North Dakota sunset that wraps around the book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. You'll notice also on the bottom of that logo, a little white dot. Well, that is indicating an award the book won this past year. Then it won the 2022 National Independent Press Award in the regional nonfiction category as a distinguished favorite. So we are very pleased to have that little logo on our book. Now then, let's get going.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce to you Scott Hildre. Scott was born in February of 1950 in McVille, North Dakota, in northeastern North Dakota in Nelson County. His family, consisting of his parents, an older brother, and a younger sister, lived about a half a mile from his father's general store. After school and a few weeks in the beginning and the end of the summer, Scott worked in his father's store. He found it to be fun selling groceries and clothing and other items. So Scott and his wife Miriam have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. They now reside in Fargo, North Dakota. So welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat, Scott.
Thank you.
Yes, hi, Scott.
Good to be here. Hi.
Okay, we'll begin by thinking of the 1950s. Would you describe the atmosphere of growing up in a small town in the 1950s?
You know, we were the luckiest generation. We had freedoms and things that we took for granted, of course, like everybody does. But we, at small town, my dad had a general store. When we were young, all the streets were gravel. There was no curb and gutter. We rode our bicycles everywhere, and we could drive all over town because it was a small town. And we played games and did all kinds of things. We'd ride up and down the alleys. There was a lady in our town that had a great apple tree that we would sneak through the bushes and get apples from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm already admitting to things I shouldn't be telling you about.
Oh, do tell.
But the friendships were great. My best friend at my early ages, there were 2 of them. One, his mom and my mom were best friends, and they would get together for coffee in the mornings and smoke cigarettes around the kitchen tables and that kind of stuff. And Larry and I would play together, little men. We'd play with little men, little plastic men, and little tiny cars and those kinds of things. And Michael was another one. He and I lived across the alley from each other, and we would get together and we'd play a little basketball, or we'd throw the football or baseballs or whatever happened to be at the time. So it was great. And, when I was about roughly 10 years old, I think, I started being able to walk down to my dad's store. And when I started doing that, my dad said, okay, if you think you're old enough to walk downtown and be downtown by yourself, and come to the store, I'm going to put you to work. So that's how I got started working in my dad's store. At the time, it was unloading boxes from the back room and putting cans of goods and stuff on the shelf and those kinds of things.
Did you have any responsibility in price marking those, or how was pricing noted on those shelves? And
we had a sticker type of thing that had ink in it, and we would just set it and then press it down on top of the cans and those kinds of things, and that was usually how it was done.
And your dad determined what the retail price would be of each item?
Yep. And it was a Fairway Foods store. Fairway is no longer, but in fact, yesterday I saw a Fairway Foods sign hanging outside a bar of all places in a small town. But anyway, we were part of the Fairway Foods chain, and they helped determine prices throughout the area so that all the Fairway Foods stores were approximately the same price of goods. All the bread on the shelves, the bread truck would come to the store a couple times a week, and they had so much space on the shelf, and they would put their breads in. Same with the milks and those kinds of things. The creamery would come over. We had a small town creamery in our town. They made their own butter and all those kinds of things. They got milk from the local farmers, and then they pasteurized it and things. So it was.
Was that an era when there were milkmen and they would deliver in trucks, that
was the era, but we didn't have that in our town.
Okay.
You could go to the creamery and buy it fresh. I mean, or the stores, because they had it, and then at the early ages, it was in glass bottles. Then eventually they went to cartons and those kinds of things. But my grandmother, my dad's mom, lived in Duluth, Minnesota, and when we would go there, she had a milkman that delivered the milk. And it came in glass bottles and stuff, and it was kind of cool.
Did she have a little metal box on her front porch?
Yep.
Yes. Can you explain to our viewers, if some of them didn't live in that generation with the milkman, how that milkman operated and what he would do to deliver to the customer?
Well, like I said, we didn't have one in Fargo. I mean, in McVille when I was growing up, but they had the one in Duluth had a truck, and he went, and you had to sign up for it, if you wanted it delivered to the house. And he would come every morning. He'd go by, and you could order to have it done every day, or you could have it every 2-3 times a week, whatever you chose. And you would put your order in, and they would deliver automatically. Usually your order was a set order, so that if you ordered a carton of milk or a bottle of milk, it came once a week or twice a week or whatever you decided.
And you'd leave the payment then in the box?
That's a good question. I'm not absolutely sure about that.
Sorry, I'm asking questions outside.
No, that's great.
And then the empty bottles would be put in there and then returned and clean.
Yep.
Okay. So
and also in that store, I think it was noted that you sold clothing. What kind
Yes,
of
we had 3 areas of our store. There was the grocery department on one end. And when I say groceries, we also did live butchering. I mean, we're not live butchering, but we butchered. We'd get the beef or pork or chickens from a local butcher shop, and then but Dad would cut it up, and we actually had a grocer or a meat man that did a lot of our cutting and that kind of stuff. But anyway, back to your other questions. We had the grocery department, and then we had a men's department, and then the other side of the store, which was a bigger portion, was ladies' clothing, and then what they called ready to wear. And that included a lot of material and sewing stuff and other types of things that at that point, I don't want to be the racist or not sexist here, but the women, that was their department, and they did all the sewing, and they made a lot of their own goods at that time and stuff.
Scott, did your dad go to markets to purchase a lot of this ready to wear and fabric?
Well, we were connected with what was called the Johnson stores. There was 18 of them in North Dakota, the eastern North Dakota, at the time. It started in Michigan, North Dakota. My great uncle, M.A. Johnson, was the founder, and he came out of Minneapolis area, and he came out to his uncle's store. It was called a mercantile store at that time in Michigan, and he came out to be the accountant. He had studied in school to be an accountant, and when he got there, he found out not only was going to be the accountant, but he was the guy that swept the floors and put the cans on the shelves and all those kinds of things, because that's what you did in a small town, type of thing. Well, he eventually bought his uncle's store, and then he bought a second store in another town, and so on, and eventually moved his entire operations, not his entire operations, but the warehouse and stuff, to Larimore, North Dakota. And the Johnson store part of the stores were clothing, but when he would go to find a location, a town that he needed a grocery store, he would look to see what else they needed. So some of the stores had clothing and groceries. Some of them had hardware departments. The one in Michigan had furniture, type of thing. So it was whatever that community needed.
In talking about your community too, you had a general store. Your parents did. Okay. Yep. What other businesses were in that small town in the 50s?
There was another grocery store, which was a super value store. It was a smaller store because they just sold groceries. There was, I think it was 3 bars.
Sure.
There was a hotel when I first grew up. There was a small hotel there, and it was a 2-story thing, and it had a cafe in the bottom part of it. There was a bank, 2 barber shops. Sure, I'm forgetting
churches,
insurance. There were 3 churches or 2 churches in town, and they were both Lutheran. One was just a what I call a regular Lutheran church, and the other one was called Free Lutheran, and type of stuff. And the Free Lutheran church was really interesting. I went to the regular, or what I call regular Lutheran church, and the Free Lutheran church, their belief was that they didn't believe in playing cards or gambling or dancing or any of those kinds of things. So when our school would have a school dance, their church would put on something for the youth, so they wouldn't be tempted to go to the dance.
That doesn't sound very free.
No, and it was interesting. A fellow in the class above me got his girlfriend pregnant, and when they had to get married in that church, it had to be dark in the church. They had to walk down the aisle backwards. I I wasn't there. I just was told about it.
Oh.
But it was really interesting. They had some interesting beliefs, and
Yes.
not that there's anything wrong with that, but they.
So, are those churches still in existence in that town?
Yes, both of them are.
Are they? Okay. Also, the mercantile or the general store that your parents had, is that still in existence?
No, not as a mercantile store.
Okay.
The fellow that Dad sold it to ran it for a couple of years and then sold it again, and it they expanded the grocery department and stuff, so the entire building kind of became a big grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you ever want to go into retailing, Scott?
I was in retail for years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I grew up. The majority of the jobs I've had as an adult have been in some type of sales.
Okay.
We'll get into that in a little bit. I'm just going to tell you one more thing about churches. We had Catholics in our town, but they had to go to the next town over to go to church. They went to Annetta to go to church.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you've given us a lot of information about your youth. Can you say that there are several that are fond, or would you go back to the freedom of your fond memories, or go back to the freedom that you mentioned earlier in your?
Well, I've been really blessed. I have had a wonderful life, and it started when I was young. I came from a good family, lots of relatives close by, and stuff. And yes, my parents were both World War II veterans, and we learned to respect and enjoy our freedoms and respect the flag and what it stood for. I just, like I said, I was just blessed. I went to a good church. I got a good belief and background that way and stuff. I ended up working at a Bible camp for several years in my younger years.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's another story that we want to get into because of the location of that Bible camp. Do you want to share about that?
Well, from McVille, 18 miles to the southwest was a small lake called Willow Lake. It's still there, and there were two parts of it. There were a lot of cabins around it, but there was the resort itself, which had a dance hall and roller skating and baseball games. A lot of our baseball games were played there. They had a cafe. They had horseback riding, those kinds of things. And then on the other portion was the Bible camp. And we had, I'm guessing, maybe 10 or 12 cabins out there. The girls were on one side of the resort, of course. The boys were on the other. And they were rough cabins, of course, with bunk beds and those kinds of stuff. But it was fun. I went as a camper when I was young, and I'd go back 2 or 3 times during the summer as a camper. And a gentleman named Gaius Osland ran the camp at that time. And he finally told my dad, he said, we should just put him to work, and then you won't have to pay all the time to have him here, type of thing. So they had what they called CITs. It was a counselor in training. Right. And of course we got all the grubby jobs, the cleanups and those kinds of things, which was fine. It was a good way to learn and stuff. But I was a CIT out there for, I don't remember how many years, 2-3 years, and then became a counselor and was there till 1968 was my last year that I worked there. And in 1969, Gaius had moved to California, and he had me come out for one year, well, actually 2 years. I was there 2 years as a camp counselor in Felton, California. So.
And whereabouts in California is Felton?
Okay, Felton is 50 miles south of San Francisco. So I was there while Haight Ashbury and all that kind of stuff was big in the news. Only we knew nothing about it. We were 50 miles south and I hadn't even heard about it, type of thing. But it was interesting when Gaius flew me out to California, and I wasn't the only one. There were several of us from North Dakota. He flew us out. The first thing we did when we got off the airplane is he took us to a drug rehabilitation center, and he took us through and showed us the conditions of some of the people that were on drugs. And I mean, some of them were really bad, laying in beds and those kinds of things. And I think it was his scare tactic to make sure that because drugs were real rampant. We had lots of offers to get drugs and stuff. And Santa Cruz, which is another town which was south of us a little bit, was a place. They had an amusement park right on the beach, with all the rides and all that kind of stuff. It also happened to be the home of the Hells Angels.
Oh.
And when we were there, we had camp jackets that had Camp 69 on it, because that was the year, and Camp Staff 69, and the Hells Angels, and they were nice to us. They were very nice to us, and stuff. But they kept wanting to get our jackets because they had the Camp Staff 69 on it, and and it was really funny. And one of the guys had been asking me and stuff, and I said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll trade you for your colors," because he was, he had his Hells Angels vest on, and he said, "Well, I can't do that." I said, "I understand." I said, "I just want you to know that, I can't either."
Okay.
But yeah, it was kind of an interesting time.
Mm-hmm. I prior to coming onto the Fun Chat, we had talked about which leads me into asking you about this very interesting situation that happened with your cousin
my aunt.
Your aunt, I'm sorry. And this was in the 50s?
This would have been probably in the 40s.
Okay. It's still worth telling.
Okay. Well, at one point in time, Al Capone spent a lot of time in East Grand Forks because at a place called Whitey's Cafe. And Whitey's had a back room area that if you pulled a curtain on the wall back, they had one-armed bandits there. So, and I don't know what his connection was, if he made any money off of those or if he just came to play, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But he spent a fair amount of time there, I guess. And one day, my oldest aunt, Stella, was working the cafe because Grandma and Grandpa were gone someplace, and my grandparents and family, my dad and everybody, lived upstairs above the cafe, and it was downtown Petersburg, North Dakota. And all of a sudden, these two very well-dressed gentlemen came into town and came to the cafe and came and sat. Having trouble with my screen, sorry. Oh. But came in and sat down and ordered breakfast, and then they had several people that were standing outside and around that needed to have breakfast, so they served all of them. I don't know if you can see me. I can't see you guys on the screen anymore. Okay. Okay, then I'll quit messing with this and go on. So they ate breakfast and everything, and they were very polite. And at that time, you could get steak and eggs and whatever for about $1.25. And at the end of everything, this gentleman tipped my aunt $10, which was a lot of money back in those days. Yeah. And had told her, he said, "We were never here. You didn't see us." And she said, "Oh, okay," because she didn't know who he was. And she was just glad to have the money. Sure. And they left. And about 2-3 hours later, a bunch of men walked in, all dressed in black or dressed up and stuff. and they were asking if she had seen this person. They had a poster, and his name was Al Capone, and of course she said no. And she didn't. She probably didn't even know who Al Capone was back in the type of thing. But I guess from what I understand was that they were after him, but he would be up in that area and then he'd slide up into Canada, so he could get away.
Unusual, North Dakota, huh?
A good place to hide out, but get away, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on the trail. The authorities.
The other thing that's a little connected to that, not directly with Al Capone, but my dad used to tell us about when he was younger. He and Grandpa, because it was Prohibition then, would go into, and I think it was Minnesota or up into Canada, and buy liquor, and they took the back seat out of their car and put the boxes of liquor there, and then covered them up with blankets and brought them back to North Dakota. So,
and then sold them under the table, kind of. Huh?
Yeah, I guess so. He also talked about Grandpa making beer in the basement of the house, and not that I ever saw it, but they'd make beer, make their own beer.
Yeah,
and stuff, and he told the story about he and his buddy threw an old pair of shoes in the batch once, and I don't know if Grandpa knew it. I suppose he did when he drained it or something, but he kept telling him, "Boy, that's the best beer I've ever had, never made."
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
they would improve the flavor.
Why don't you mention to our viewers the name of the book that's out that tells the story of your aunt?
Okay, it's Extraordinary North Dakotans, and I don't have a copy of it, but I've seen one.
Okay.
There's another book out there about M.A. Johnson, the gentleman that started the Johnson stores, and I've got a copy of that downstairs, but I think it's 50 years of country storekeeping.
Oh, so
that's a good book too.
M.A. Johnson, right?
M.A. Johnson. Yeah.
I will look for that, as Amazon usually has about anything, so maybe that's where I can locate a copy or two. Okay, and tell me M.A. Johnson's book title.
50 Years of Country Storekeeping.
Thank you. Yeah, that will be an interesting read.
You know, our great grandparents had a mercantile in Goodrich, and I wonder if they dealt with this Johnson company.
That's true.
We'll never know, but they probably did.
And what town was it?
Goodrich, North Dakota.
Okay.
It's north of Steele, kind of between Steele and Jamestown, but north. Hertzfield, Goodrich, Fessenden.
Yep. I'm familiar with that area. But that would have been further out than the Johnson stores went.
Okay. Yep, there might have been.
Not that they couldn't have bought goods from him, but
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so many people have been influenced by 4-H. What's your experience with 4-H and Boy Scouts and your church influence?
Sure. I was a 4-H kid, I guess, if you want to call it that. The majority of the ones in our group were country kids, dealing with cattle and those kinds of things. But I was, of course, in the big city of McVille.
And what was the population of McVille? Do you remember?
At that time, maybe 800.
That's a pretty good size.
But it went down to about 400 when my dad was the mayor. I mean, not just because he was the mayor, but
he left.
We've gone down that far before.
What about today? What about today?
I don't know. My sister still lives up there, but it's a lot of the businesses are gone and stuff. I just saw something yesterday that there's somebody new in the cafe up there. They've reopened the cafe, and she's got a bakery. So
is there still a school in McVille, or
there's still a school building. They do have school there, but it's a joint school.
Consolidated.
Yep, consolidated. Thank you. The Nelson County went down to two schools. Two school groups. They call it Dakota Prairie now. Is one of them, and that's the big one. And that has kids from every town in Nelson County, with the exception of Lakota. Lakota has their own school.
Okay.
And Lakota is the county seat?
Lakota is the county seat, and used to be one of the big towns in Nelson County. But they've gotten a lot smaller also.
Yeah.
Okay. And Scott, you are very active as a Lion in your adult life. When did you start membership in the Lions, and is there anything from the 1950s that drew you to become a part of the Lions organization?
Okay. I've been a Lion for 47 years, and I was working at a men's store, ran a men's store at West Acres shopping center.
Okay.
West Acres was the largest shopping center between Minneapolis and Seattle, Washington. It was here in Fargo. I was 23 years old, I think, and 23, 24, someplace right in there. The gentleman that ran the shopping center at that time was a Lion in Moorhead, Minnesota, which is a sister city to Fargo. And they wanted to start a new club. So they decided they would try to start one at West Acres with some of the store managers. And at that time, Lions was strictly a male organization. And he encouraged me to join, which I did. And I joined more because I felt I was pressured into it more than anything. But it was a good way to get to visit and be part of the group, the other managers and stuff. Lions is the largest service organization in the world. We're over 1,500,000. It was started in 1917 in Chicago, Illinois, by a gentleman named Melvin Jones. We became an international group when a group from Canada wanted to learn what they were doing and stuff in Chicago. Helen Keller came to us in 1921 and asked us to be the Knights for the Blind. So our first major service projects were dealing with blind people. Now we have 5 criteria. We work with the blind. We work with hunger. We work with diabetes, child cancer, and the environment.
Wow.
And then each club is individual. So if our club decides that, look, for instance, a couple of years ago, there was an apartment fire, and it burnt down an apartment building, and several of the people were displaced. And we went over to the hotel and got them rooms, and brought in clothing and got clothing for everybody and stuff because they'd lost everything. And fed them and those kinds of things. So we do, each individual Lions Club does different things. In my district, which is half of the state of North Dakota, we have 51 Lions Clubs. Most of them are in small towns, like McVille, even though McVille doesn't have one. But each club is kind of a commercial club for their own community.
Okay.
So a lot of things that the community needs, the Lions Clubs do. They clean parks, and they raise money for people, and they put on benefits and do those kinds of things.
At what age can one join the Lions group?
To actually join a Lions Club, and you can be male or female these days, which has been since about 1970, 6 or something like that, or 84. Okay. I don't remember the exact dates. Anyway, 18 and above to join an actual Lions Club, but there is a thing called a Leo's Club, which is from I think it's age 8 to 18, 8 or 10, someplace in there.
Oh.
And is that to help develop community service then?
Yes,
with young people?
it is. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
And the Lions Club, for instance, last year, the International Club, through donations from each of the individual Lions Clubs around the world, raised $325 million to give to major disaster areas. When Florida had their hurricane here several months ago, the Lions were the very first people on the ground to help, and they were the first people to donate money. So,
have you ever been to help in a disaster area outside of the state?
No, I have not. I would love to do that at some point in my life, but when most of my Lions life, I had a job and family and those kinds of things. So, but my wife and I have been retired now for about 5 years, and we're starting to stretch our wings a little bit. In fact, we are Lions is the only service club that has their own day at the United Nations, and for the first time ever, I'm going to go to New York with my wife and join a group at the International Day for Lions at the university. At United Nations.
United Nations, yes.
Do you know what that program will consist of?
I'm sorry. What?
Do you know what that program will consist of at the UN when you're?
I don't. I know that we'll be there when they're, I think, in session. There's a reception for us, those kinds of things. One of the Lions International directors is going to meet us there and be our guide.
Sure.
So.
Oh, cool. That will be this summer?
It'll be, it's March 2nd.
Soon.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very soon. Another month.
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
And how much longer will you serve as a district governor in North Dakota?
My district governorship runs from July 1st to June 30th. So this coming June, at the end of June, I'll be. Then you become immediate past district governor, and we have some duties there too. And then after that, you can stay on and help as long as you want on that level, or you can retire out.
Well, viewers, we are just so grateful to have Mr. Scott Hildre as our guest today, who grew up in McVille, North Dakota, and now is a resident of Fargo. His stories have been very interesting, all the way from his childhood working in his parents' store in McVille to the stories of Al Capone and beyond. And so we hope that you find this quite interesting. That's something that happened in the 1950s. But Scott, before we close our program today, can you think of a fun memory of the 1950s that comes to the top of your head?
Oh boy, tons of them, I guess. Like I said, I was blessed. I had a lot of good childhood friends that are still friends today. Our high school class still gets together about every 5 years and stuff for a weekend. Just the games we played, the things we did, the Red Rovers and all those kinds of things, riding bicycle and just the freedom, like I said, my folks were both World War II vets. My mom was in the Navy and was a nurse over in Hawaii. My dad served in 3 major battles. So we learned a lot of respect and stuff. And they in turn taught me how to help others. I mean, they didn't have a lot themselves, but what they had, they shared.
And has that been one of the most influential virtues in life too?
Yes, by far. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, both sets of my grandparents had cafes, one in Michigan and one in Petersburg, and they too gave. they on Christmas and on Thanksgiving, they would have all the old bachelors and the widows and stuff come in for free meals. And
oh, super.
yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
And I know we had mentioned one other time while we talked is my grandfather was 16 when he came from Norway by himself. And lived with an uncle that was already here just south of Petersburg and stuff. And my grandmother was just born. She was born in Norway, but came over then. And that's my dad's side. And my mom's side, my great grandfather came through Ellis Island.
Oh, did they share that anything about that immigrating into the country with you or at all?
My dad did and stuff. My mom did a little bit, but and stuff. And I have some pictures from those days. And I actually have a copy of my grandfather coming through Ellis Island. I've got a copy of his paperwork, and which was really interesting because his name was Thomason. His last name was Thomason when at the beginning of the paperwork, and it was Thompson by the time it finished. So they changed his name to Thompson. So
Yeah.
Okay, so make it American. They made him American already.
Yep.
Yes. Scott, we thank you so much for sharing your memories with us of the 1950s, some ahead, some after, but it all wraps up into one wonderful conversation we've had with you. Thank you so much for sharing of your time with us today.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. And viewers, as we move on to conclude our program today, we'd like to remind you that there are events of the 1950s that might come to your mind that you would like to share with us on the 1950s Fun Chat. And by doing that, you can contact us at sisters@whilethewindmillwatch.com and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get back in touch with you. So remember, our email address is sisters@whilethewindmillwatch.com. Jackie, can you conclude our program, please?
Oh, well, I will just remind our viewers to please click that red subscribe button that you see, as well as the blue thumbs up button. And tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
You're welcome.